For our last segment, we're excited to introduce a new segment to Bold Life called Bold Soul. This will be a regular segment hosted by our bold friend Klay S. Williams. He's a regular on our show, and he guest hosted for me quite a few times when I was on maternity leave and did an awesome job. We Twitter messaged about it. Yes. He's the best. We're happy to have him back on the show today. And for our first Bold Life segment, he brought Bold Soul segment. He brought Kimberley Copeland with him as a guest. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you both.
Thanks for having us.
So, Klay, I'm just going to let you tell us a little bit more about Bold Soul.
Yeah, so I was thinking to myself, there's so many different, just divisive rhetoric that's happening in the world today. And a lot of people are wondering, where can they go for spiritual direction? I said, wait a minute, that's something that we can do on Bold Life. And so Bold Soul is a new segment, is geared towards bringing on experts, wellness practitioners, how-to coaches on how they can teach our audience different spiritual accessible principles. And today, I thought I could not bring anyone who sort of exemplifies that, especially in the unconventional, radical ways. My dear friend Kimberley Copeland, affectionately coined as Reverend Yogi.
Oh, wow. So yoga is your thing. That is what you teach through. Klay, why was it important to bring Kimberley to us?
Right. So one thing that I think that really separates Kim is that she has juxtaposed her background as a Master's of Divinity recipient and Master's of Criminal Justice into her practice. It's a basis for educational foundation. So, Kim, how has that been sort of a launching pool for the way in which you function as a yoga teacher and in your practice?
So I am a minister, and the way that I minister is through the yoga practice. And I just feel that we're living in a time where we need embodied practices in order to be able to be transformed by our faith. And I know this because it's been the case in my own experience. And as having a background in ministry and a Master of Divinity, it comes to bear in a class that I teach weekly called Spirit Flow. Okay. So I teach a class that is biblically based. So we have one short little Dharma talk that's a lesson, and then we practice hot power yoga. And the class has a following. People love it. In terms of the justice piece of it, yoga teaches you how to be a better person in society, how to live in right relationships with other people, because you first establish a relationship with yourself. You breathe into all of the desperate parts of your body that you don't deal with, and then suddenly you can breathe into those spaces in community.
Yeah. And one thing that's been really interesting with just people in general is people think of yoga as exercise and movement. They don't really think about the yoga as being a faith movement. How does your class differ in maybe creating that environment?
So yoga teaches us how to calm down. And we live in a time and space where we all need to learn how to calm ourselves down.
Oh, yeah.
And we do. And when we calm ourselves down, we help to calm other people down too. And when we're that calm, we can hear a lesson that we might not hear in another space.
Yeah.
So that's, it literally, it peels away all of the excess, all of the stuff that's going on in our minds so that we can be very clear. And when you're very clear, you can hear truth. You can hear a wisdom teaching maybe differently than you might if you were sitting in another space.
Because your mind isn't so chaotic.
It's not cluttered.
Yeah, that makes sense. Klay, how do you find kind of quiet in this crazy, hectic life that you live?
Well, for me, it's a lot of meditation. It's a lot of staying grounded in the present moment. When I wake up in the morning, I have a series of prayers that I offer. In the middle of the day, there's a series of prayers that I offer. And when I go to bed at night, there's a series of prayers that I offer. And I limit myself to news. I don't watch the news at all. I'll maybe a couple of days during the week, I'll go ahead and do some research around, what's happening in the world. But I take away any post that can be negative and limit the amount of negative energy that I'm taking in. Yeah. Which is probably a really good question to even ask you, especially for our audience. How does one stay grounded, especially practicing yoga? And then another part of that is, how do you personally stay grounded?
So I stay grounded by practicing yoga.
That's
it's a practice.
Golden rule.
Yeah. Every you fall out of it, but you come back. You come back to the practice, and the practice does ground me. And to your point about cleanliness, there's a teaching in yoga that we should surround ourselves with clean spaces and also be careful about what we digest, which includes the messages that we're receiving and the sorts of communique that we may have with individuals in different spaces. We've got to be clear and try to practice cleanliness. And if it's not clean, process it out.
When you say processes it out, does counting like swiping left like they did on Tinder Live today, or locking people off your phone? I mean, in the real,
So those are real things. And I had a teacher say this. So sometimes when those things happen, we're experiencing grief, but we talk ourselves out of it. We react, or we rationalize, or we complain, but we don't feel the experience of grief. So it's still there somewhere hidden in the body. So the yoga practice helps us experience, literally process out that grief that we might not have known was sitting in our hips, you know, and then it's gone. And we have grief over everything, over the way things used to be, over relationships, over jobs, over, you know, things we once wanted, but we often just talk ourselves out of it. We don't process it through our
and
bodies.
the body holds on, like you said, like you
That's
said, in
right.
the hips or whatever,
That's right.
but stress is like, it's really the number one killer because that's what manifests so many diseases. So that's important to have a practice like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great having you both.
Thank you for having
What a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Have you done the class?
Oh my gosh, have I? Yes. Kim is a phenomenal teacher. And where can we find you on social media before we let you go?
Best place, central place is reverendyogi.com.
Okay. And also, just for listeners, Kim is going to be my next guest on my podcast, Planning Conversations, next Friday, where you really get a jump start on her life and all of her wonderful things she has going on and teachings that she does.
Do you have a video series too where people who don't live in New York can do your class?
Working on it.
Good, because new mom doesn't get out much, but definitely wants to work on like the whole flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
The piece. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have Old Soul.